Never take a lift from a truck at night. The road stretched endlessly under the dim glow of the streetlights flickering in the cold wind that howled through the empty highway. A young traveler walked alone, his footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness as the night grew darker, the silence of the road interrupted only by the occasional rustling of leaves and distant cries of known creatures. His breath was visible in the freezing air as he tightened his jacket round himself, feeling the chill creep into his bones. The weight of exhaustion pulled at his limbs, his legs sore from walking for hours with no sign of shelter or rest in sight. His eyes scanned the distance, hoping to find a passing vehicle that could take him closer to his destination before the night swallowed him whole. A faint rumbling sound grew in the distance, the dull glow of headlights piercing through the thick darkness ahead. His heart leaped with relief as he turned to face the approaching truck, its massive body emerging from the shadows like a mechanical beast rolling forward with an eerie hum. The ground trembled slightly under its weight, the vibrations creeping up his legs as he raised his hand, signaling for a ride. The truck slowed down gradually, its engine growling before coming to a halt beside him. The towering vehicle loomed over him, its darkened windows revealing nothing of the figure inside. The door creaked open slowly, an unseen force beckoning him to step inside. Without hesitation, he climbed into the cabin, the scent of old leather and something metallic filling his nostrils as the door slammed shut behind him with an unsettling finality. The truck rumbled back to life, rolling forward into the abyss of the empty highway. The world outside blurred into streaks of darkness, the dim glow of the dashboard casting eerie shadows across the worn-out interior. The presence behind the wheel remained silent, barely noticeable except for the occasional shift in the seat and the sound of fingers tapping against the steering wheel. The traveler felt a growing unease settle in his chest, a cold sensation creeping up his spine as he tried to shake off the heavy silence pressing against him. The road ahead stretched endlessly, the truck moving at an unnaturally steady pace, the hum of the engine drowning out every other sound. Time felt distorted as the traveler struggled to keep his eyes open, his exhaustion merging with an inexplicable sense of dread. Something felt wrong, though he could not explain what. The air inside the truck felt heavier, suffocating, as though invisible hands were pressing against his chest. His vision blurred slightly, the dim lights outside appearing to shift and warp, casting unfamiliar shapes onto the window. The figure in the driver's seat never spoke, never turned, never acknowledged his presence beyond the mechanical movements that kept the truck on the road. The traveler wanted to ask how much farther they had to go, but his throat felt dry, his voice caught in his chest as if something unseen was holding it down. The darkness outside deepened, the trees lining the road turning into skeletal figures that reached toward the vehicle as if trying to drag it into the unknown. The truck continued moving, the monotonous hum of the tires against the road growing louder in his ears until it was all he could hear. The world outside no longer looked familiar, the road twisting unnaturally as the shadows grew thicker, swallowing the dim light of the moon. The traveler blinked rapidly, his mind clouded with a strange dizziness that made it hard to focus. The air inside the cabin turned colder, the scent of something rotten creeping in, wrapping around him like invisible tendrils. His hands trembled as he tried to shake off the sensation, but the feeling only grew stronger, an overwhelming presence filling the small space around him. The figure in the driver's seat remained motionless, its form still obscured in the dim lighting, fingers tapping in an irregular rhythm that no longer matched the beat of the road beneath them. A sudden realization struck the traveler as he looked outside again, his stomach twisting in horror. The road had changed. The familiar straight path was gone, replaced by a looping stretch that seemed to circle endlessly, the same twisted trees and abandoned signposts appearing again and again. No matter how long they drove, they were going nowhere, trapped in an endless cycle of darkness and shifting landscapes. Panic clawed at his chest as he reached for the door handle, his fingers grasping at the cold metal, but it would not budge. The lock remained firm, as if fused into the frame, refusing to grant him an escape. The truck's interior felt smaller, the space around him closing in, suffocating, pressing against him with an unseen force that drained the warmth from his body.
The presence behind the wheel finally moved, a hand slowly lifting from the wheel, reaching towards something unseen beneath the dashboard. The traveler's breath caught in his throat as an unnatural clicking sound filled the cabin, an eerie mechanical noise that sent chills down his spine. The truck's headlights flickered, the darkness outside pressing closer as the shapes in the shadows began to shift. Something was watching, waiting, just beyond the edge of the dim light, unseen eyes piercing through the abyss. The traveler tried to move, tried to scream, but his body felt paralyzed, trapped within the overwhelming weight of something unnatural and ancient. The truck's speed increased without warning, the engine roaring like a beast set free. The trees outside blurred together into a chaotic storm of shadows, their twisted limbs stretching and twisting unnaturally. The air inside the cabin grew thick, suffocating, filled with whispers that seemed to seep from the very walls. The traveler's pulse pounded in his ears as he turned his gaze toward the driver, his eyes widening as he finally caught a glimpse of the face hidden in the dim glow of the dashboard. There was no face, no human features, just a hollow darkness where a face should have been, shifting and writhing as if alive. The traveler recoiled in horror, his back pressing against the cold door, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The thing behind the wheel turned its head slowly, the void where its eyes should have been staring directly at him, sending an unbearable chill through his soul. The truck jolted violently, the headlights flickering as the world outside twisted into a nightmarish blur. The traveler squeezed his eyes shut, unable to bear the sight, his body trembling as the whispers grew louder, crawling into his mind like a plague. A deafening screech filled the air as the truck veered sharply off the road, the tires skidding against the cracked pavement. The traveler's body lurched forward, his hands grasping desperately at the dashboard as the truck plunged into darkness, the world around him dissolving into an abyss of shadows and chilling silence. For a moment, there was nothing, just emptiness, a void that swallowed all sense of time and existence. Then suddenly, he was standing back on the roadside, alone, the cold wind biting at his skin. The truck was gone, the road eerily quiet, as if it had never been there at all. His breath came in ragged gasps as he stumbled backward, his mind struggling to grasp what had just happened. The headlights of another vehicle appeared in the distance, growing closer, cutting through the darkness. But this time, he did not raise his hand for a ride. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the night, never looking back.